All right, at this time for the record, I'm going to call D1DC 04904057 and associated other cause numbers, all the state of Texas versus Carmen Mejia, as well as ex parte Carmen Mejia, the writ of habeas corpus on file in this case. We do need Ms. Mejia's presence.
She's on her way out.
Okay.
462 by officers.
We are on the record in State versus Mejia and ex parte Mejia. The record reflects that Ms. Mejia is now present in the courtroom. Our interpreter has been previously sworn, and we're ready to proceed. Let me just say that we're here today pursuant to a mandate from the Court of Criminal Appeals in this matter. Over the course of the last 2.5, I guess we're getting close to 3 years in this case, there has been a tremendous amount of discovery, investigation, multiple hearings, and we finally reached a conclusion that Ms. Mejia and her attorneys from the Innocence Project and the District Attorney's Office and I all agreed that Ms. Mejia had been wrongfully convicted this court, and I entered a finding of actual innocence. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals has now affirmed that finding of actual innocence, and we're here this afternoon to get final closure in this matter. So with that, Ms. Mejia's counsel are, go ahead and state your names for the record.
Timothy Gumkowski for Ms. Mejia from the Innocence Project.
Let me see if I can get some volume up there. Add that again, Mr. Counsel.
Timothy Gumkowski for the Innocence Project on behalf of Ms. Mejia.
Chabelle Castro from the Innocence Project on behalf of Ms. Mejia.
Vanessa Potkin from the Innocence Project on behalf of Ms. Mejia.
Right.
Good afternoon, Judge.
Thank you. And for the District Attorney's Office,
Carmen Mejia on behalf of the state of Texas.
Sarah Byram on behalf of the state of Texas, Your Honor.
thank you. So, having received the mandate from the Court of Criminal Appeals, we're here this afternoon on the state's motion to dismiss the charges against Ms. Mejia. Mr. Belair, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. We're here today because an innocent woman spent almost 23 years in prison for a tragic accident. In this case, from the start, the worst was assumed, that this was an intentional act. It was decided that a woman who had no criminal history, no history of child abuse, was, in the words of the trial prosecutor, or had, in the words of the trial prosecutor, the coldest, darkest, blackest, evil heart that you can have. We could not have been more wrong. And it turned a tragic accident into a wrongful conviction. That initial assumption was what anchored the entire investigation. What happened on July 28, 2003 was a tragedy. A small child was horrifically burned and died as the result of extremely hot water coming from a bathtub tap. Our hearts go out to the family for the loss of their child, and we owe them an apology for getting this wrong. As humans, it's natural for us to want to find a cause and hold responsible parties. This case is one where the stark power imbalance between law enforcement and the justice system on one side and a poor, struggling mother on the other is laid bare. During the post-conviction proceedings, the truth came out when Your Honor heard from multiple credible witnesses that this was an accident. Once full information was provided to the medical examiner in 2024, that medical examiner, Dr. Elizabeth Peacock, bravely revised her manner of death conclusion from homicide to accident. I will also mention that two other experts from trial, Dr. Kerr and Mr. Peltier, when presented with a full picture, also told this court that their trial testimony was wrong. Dr. Peacock's willingness to say that she was wrong and that the new information changed her conclusion should be applauded. Dr. Peacock told Your Honor that admitting her error was the right thing to do. This process of exoneration was one that came, as you said, after the court listened to all the evidence and the law in this case. And Your Honor, thank you for doing your part to bring the truth to light. Your Honor agreed with both the state and Ms. Mejia, and you recommended to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals that no crimes occurred and that Ms. Mejia should be found actually innocent. In January, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals issued their opinion, and they agreed with Your Honor's assessment that Ms. Mejia is innocent. In a criminal case, prosecutors have a duty to the people of the state, and we also have a duty to protect the rights of the accused. The foundation for these is our primary duty to see that justice is done. Today, my office will fulfill that obligation. I will end with how this entire thing started. Former Deputy Art Guerrero.
Mr. Guerrero.
Thank you, Your Honor, I apologize. He was the bailiff in this case, and his tireless efforts began the long, careful process that ultimately resulted in all of us being here today. And once again, thank you for your persistence in seeking justice. That's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Guerrero, would you care to come forward and address the court, please?
Yes, Your Honor.
First of all, I would like to say thank God for this day. Thank God, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Your Honor, the Innocent Project and the DA's team, I'm here not to give a speech, but I have thought about this for a good while, that I would be here in front of y'all. And I didn't want to give a speech. I wanted to give my story. And also my story to Miss Carmen Mejia. First of all, I'd like to say that I never have known Miss Mejia. Actually, during the trial, never even saw her face until the end. And that is because the first day that the trial started, the first time she walked out from the back, she laid her head down on the table where she was seated. She had some kind of napkin or something over her head, and she cried. She cried the whole trial. The whole trial. She's never raised her head. Only until she had to at the end. And that was the only time that I saw her face. And of course, it was a very tearful face. I have done quite a few trials, and I have always taken interest as much as I could of what was going on. I took care of my 12 jurors all the time, but at the same time I had, I guess what you would call first chair, listening to everything that's going on from everyone. And from my experience in my lifetime of my career in the past and working at the courthouse, you learn a lot. You learn a lot. You do not have to be an attorney. You do not have to be anything legal. But if you pay attention and you listen over and over, you begin to understand what they're speaking about. Of course, you're not an attorney and you're not going to be one just by listening, but you do learn a lot. And I'm sure some of these deputies that do this every day would agree with that. I used to tell one of my judges that when we did DWIs, I used to say, Judge, same movie, just different actors. Because a lot of it is pretty much the same in that case, in those cases. What happened, one of the things that really got my attention right away was what I had learned, that when you did trials, certain things supposed to happen, especially for the defense. And they did not happen. And that got my attention right away. But as you well know, I was the bailiff. And you take care of the jurors. That's your job. Take care of the judge. That's also your job. But it stayed in my mind. And then right at the end, there's a part where a relative, a father, a mother, or son or daughter, will stand close to the defense and face the person accused. And that happened. And the dad of this little boy, may he rest in peace, was the one to speak to Miss Mejia. They spoke in Spanish, and I speak Spanish, so I could understand every word that was being said. I was sitting somewhere around this area with my jurors, but for the first time I was able to see Miss Mejia when she had to stand up to face this gentleman. And I think his name was Jose. I'm not sure, but I think that's the name that stuck to me. And the words that he asked, or the question that he asked was, "Why did you do this? Carmen, why did you do this to my son?" And I looked at Miss Mejia, and she looked at him straight in the eye, because she was facing toward where he was, and I'm sitting real close to where he's standing. And she looked at him straight in the eye, and she said, "Jose, yo no lo hice," which means I did not do it. At that moment, right after saying those words, she started to say something else, but she was completely shut off by one of her defense attorneys in Spanish. "Cállese, no diga nada," which means shut up, don't say anything. And you could hear a pin drop. She put her head down, and normally, of course, started crying. And that was it. And it was just that moment that something told me there's a possibility this lady did not do what she's being charged with, what she's being found guilty, and which is now being sentenced to life. But again, there was nothing that I could do. There was nothing at all, of course. And they took her back. I knew where she was going. And something told me at that moment that something had to be done. And I knew that it was God that was telling me that. And I want to tell y'all God works mysterious ways. And remember that I'm saying that because there will be a place in my little story that I will come back to that and tell you why. So I went home and I thought about this more and more and kept thinking, gosh, this lady's going to go into prison and she's going to spend her rest of her life. And she has all these children, and what's going to happen to them? And of course, I couldn't get an answer because I was actually speaking to God, but at the same time, there were four walls around me. So weeks passed by, months passed by, and I kept trying to think, okay, if God wants me to help her, how am I going to help her? I don't have the means. I'm not an attorney. I don't know anyone. And at the same time, I have my job. If anyone in this courthouse knows about it, I will be gone as fast as the wind. And who knows what else they might do. I actually was afraid that if this court system that I had just been in would find out that there would be some charges charged against me. For what? I don't know. But I'm sure something could come up. And I was afraid. So I had to keep this completely secret with me. I call it a secret because I couldn't talk to anybody of how I felt of certain things that had taken place during this trial and certain things that were supposed to take place that didn't take place. I will not go into that, but y'all probably have already gone through it. So months passed by, then years, and she kept coming back to me. I could picture her in that cell in prison, knowing that there was no one that was going to help her. And she was going to spend the rest of her life there for something that I think, personally, like witnessing the trial, that possibly she had not done. And the whole time that I thought about this, I kept asking God, what am I supposed to do? Lead me to whatever I'm supposed to do. And this went on and on, year after year after year. But for some reason, she kept coming back to me. I could picture her in that cell, not dressed in white, but just dressed in black or something similar to what I had seen her wearing the last time I saw her. That's what I could see in my mind. That's how I remember her. I asked a couple of, I got to know a lot of the defense attorneys here, all wonderful defense attorneys. Some of them, all of them with experience, but some of them with more experience. And a lot of them did appeals. And you begin to learn what appeals are and how they work and who's the one that can do these appeals. Not everybody can do appeals. because you're an attorney. And I contacted a couple of them separate times, but I asked them who knew me. I asked, can we meet, but can we meet away from this building here? I'm afraid. Because as you well know, some of y'all work here, people know you, and they're always wondering what are you up to? At least I felt that way. And we met at a coffee shop. I met with one, and then I met with the other one, and I told them the story. These were appeal attorneys that had worked on appeals to try to get people that had been sentenced to maybe have a new trial. And they said, yes, there's something there. You have something there. Because I told them the whole deal from the very beginning and why I thought that you really needed a new trial. I never heard from that defense attorney, that appeal attorney. I never did. And I understood why. Then I tried another one. Same thing happened. And as time went along, I met a wonderful, wonderful person that had been on the Court of Criminal Appeals, and decided that he was filling in, and then it just turned out that he was going to run for the district court. And for some reason, we hit it off real good in discussion and talking. And once he got elected, he asked me if I would be his bailiff, and I said it'd be an honor. And for the first time, I felt like I had someone that I trusted, that I could talk to. Because I didn't feel that way with anyone else. There were nice people, don't get me wrong. There were wonderful people, but inside of me, I didn't feel comfortable enough to tell them. But with this Judge Charlie Baird of the 299, he sat down and we talked in private. He didn't comment on it. He just listened. And he knew how I felt about it. And it didn't go anywhere. It's just that I knew I had somebody I could talk to when I felt very emotional thinking about this. And the years went by. Then along came a group also called the Innocent Project, which I never knew they existed to begin with. This is how I got introduced to the Innocent Project from West Texas. They were representing a young man who had been accused of a rape in Texas Tech. He was going to Texas Tech, there had been a rape, and they accused him. They put him in jail before he went to trial. Somehow he was denied his insulin, whatever he was supposed to take for that illness, and he passed away. And later on, as the Innocent Project worked on his case, they were able to determine who the real accuser was, or who was responsible for that rape that was already in prison. So the short story is they needed a judge, a district judge, to do an exoneration, and possibly similar to what the Honorable Blvd has been doing with us. I might not be correct, but possibly. And we did it in our court. in the 299. And of course, there was people from everywhere, like y'all are here with the news media, but many more. And afterwards, I walked up to one of the Innocent Project defense attorneys and I asked, can I have one of your cards? And he said, sure. So I said, I'd like to call you and I'd like to talk to you. He said, sure, anytime. So I let some time go by and then I called and I talked to him and I told him who I was and he remembered me. And I said, there's a case that I've been dealing with in my mind that I witnessed myself, but I don't know who to call. I don't know who to talk to. What should I do? Can y'all help me? And he stated that they had a full agenda, but for me to keep trying, not to give up. Well, that was encouragement, but that's as far as it went. So more time went by, more years went by, and I feel like I was carrying this cross with me the whole time. And how far and how long was I going to be able to? Because it was really, really bothering me mentally. Mentally. Sure, I could speak to you and you could say, oh, that's Art, you know, he's doing great and this and that. But I didn't dare tell them the story because they would not understand. So I kept it inside. So then, the end of 2015, it was time for me to retire, if that's a word, retire. And I did. And the first thing I did that first week was, okay, I'm free. I feel free. I feel like I can do what I want to do and whatever. And if they want to do something to me, here I am. Well, I remember it was summertime. I don't recall the month, possibly August, because it was real hot. But I was inside, thank God. And I called New York City, not knowing anybody or anything other than I'm looking for the Innocent Project in New York City. And the reason I picked New York City is because it's such a big city. They're bound to have an Innocent Project in New York City, in which they did. And they put me in contact, and they said, yes, we'll put you in contact. And just as soon as they said that, I felt like, thank you, God, I'm on the road. I'm on the right road. And out of nowhere, this wonderful young lady answered. And forgive me if I forget exactly what happened, but there was a young lady that answered to a Vanessa. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it was such a great feeling to hear that she was with the Innocent Project. She was a defense attorney, and she was so pleasant to talk to. And I explained to her who I was in Austin, Texas, and told her a little bit about, she wanted to know what was it about. And at the end, I mentioned to her, I said, if you don't believe me, contact this retired district judge, Charlie Baird, in Austin, Texas. He's now a defense attorney. And he will vouch for me. And he knows about this trial. I have talked to him. And I gave her the number. Whether she did or not, I don't know. And Vanessa did say that they were real busy, which I understand, with people all over the United States that need help. But she said, we'll get back with you. And I said, great. Well, once again, I know that they're real busy, but a year went by. Possibly a year and a half, maybe 2 years, I don't know, but it's not to their fault. I understand. So I said, wait, gosh, what's going on? I'm speaking to myself. Here we go again. You know, I start good and doesn't end right. So I had her name, I had her number, and even their address there in New York City. So I picked up the phone again and called again. And sure enough, she answered again. And she said, oh, Art, you know, and so she remembered me. I thought, well, that's good, you know. So I said, I don't know if I said, I thought y'all had forgotten me or something, something like that, you know. And she said, oh, no, we haven't forgotten you. We have everything here. We've been busy with other cases, but we're ready to work on your case, on Miss Mejia's case. And I said, great. So I said, I'm going to leave it up to you all. I'm going to turn it over to you all to do your work, and you know how to get a hold of me. This is my number. She said, we do. And I don't recall if they call me back again for me to tell the whole story, and they said, we're going to record you. And I said, that's great. I want to be recorded. I don't want anybody to forget anything. And in case you do, you can play it back. So that's how it went with the Innocent Project. They got involved, they got into it, and as time went along, we're talking about years, because it was 20 years ago. So you can imagine what happens 20 years in your life. Some things we forget, and sometimes some things we don't. And this definite thing was not going to let me go. So all I wanted, I don't know if I mentioned to her or not, and I will say it to everyone here, all I wanted for Miss Carmen Mejia to have a retrial, and to have close to the best defense attorney that you could have. So this way there would not be any little things or big things left out. And I remember telling my judge, Charlie Beard, I play the lotto once in a while, and he knew that. And there was a big lotto was going to be happening that Wednesday or something. And he said, are you playing the lotto, Art? I said, you bet. And Judge, let me tell you what I would do with the money if I would win the big one. I would hire the best defense attorney that I could find to represent Miss Carmen Mejia. And once that new trial would happen with that defense attorney, wherever it would fall, That's how I would respect it. If she was found innocent, she was found innocent, but with a fair trial. And that's all I wanted for Ms. Carmen Mejia. But if she was found innocent, she would have her freedom that she should have had from day one. And keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that time is passing by. There's a DA at the time, wonderful DA. We spoke. We had a good friendship, myself and her. And she moved on. Another DA came in. I had heard of her name. I had heard that she had worked here before as a prosecutor for another DA. But I did not know her personally. So I did not feel comfortable, and I'm being as honest as I can be, with any of those DAs that I could approach and sit down and talk to privately and say, look, this is what I witnessed. What do you think? Do you think we can have a new trial? Not to let her out, but just for having a new trial. And let the jurors hear those new evidence that were presented to you all during these hearings. And some of other evidence that I thought should have been presented and were not. But that DA moved on, and out of nowhere, I hear a name of a new DA by the name of Mr. Jose Garza. And I'm thinking, where is he from? I never heard of his name. And who is he? And I want to meet him. But for some reason, I didn't know how to approach him, how to meet him, or whatever. It just wasn't happening. But the fact that my former judge that I worked for knew of this case, somehow he was close to the DA's office, working with cases of his own, and found out that Mr. Garza was interested in establishing a team, which these wonderful people that are right here in front of me represent, these prosecutors, to work on these cases that possibly would be similar to Ms. Mejia. So he mentioned to me, he said, you know, this new district attorney, Mr. Garza, decided that he's establishing this team. And I said, great. And I said, I'd like to meet him so we could talk. But to be honest with you, it didn't happen for whatever reason, but apparently they knew about it. Or somehow the judge said that he had talked to somebody in the DA's office about it. And it began to come together. So the next thing that I had heard, and this was getting close to 20 years, maybe already the 20 years when I heard about it, that there was this group, a wonderful group from Mr. Garza's DA's team and the Innocent Project working together on this behalf of Ms. Carmen Mejia. And that possibly they might ask me to come and testify for the Honorable Judge Wilbert, who was volunteering and working on this case also, and I said I'd be glad to. I have 20 years of that I need to unload on, and so this is how it all came together, and I want Ms. Mejia to know, which she probably didn't, and I understand that she didn't, to know that from the time that you were taken from this place to prison, you were not forgotten. You were not forgotten. There was somebody thinking about you the whole time, but just trying to figure out what to do and how to do it. And it possibly took me this long period of time to bring it together. Now, I think one list, I'm just going to say this and then I'm through. The reason that I said that God works mysterious ways, and I like to leave every one of y'all with this thought. When this trial was set up to go to trial, the bailiff for the 167, may he rest in peace, his name was Sal Hernandez, called me and said, Art, I want to go on vacation. I can't because there's a trial coming up. Could you help me out? And that means, could I stand in for him? He said, I like the way you work. You work similar to the way I do. You like to keep things in order and very responsive. And you're the only one that I like to ask. If not, I won't go on vacation. I said, Sal, you go on vacation with your wife and your family, and don't worry, I'll fill in for you. So think about this, ladies and gentlemen. I wasn't supposed to be the bailiff for that court, for this trial for Ms. Mejia. So just think, if I had not been there, I don't think any of us would be here. So I leave y'all with that thought. And once again, out of my heart, I thank you, Judge. I thank you, Innocent Project. And I thank y'all with the DA's office and Mr. Garza for everything y'all have done to bring this to this beautiful conclusion. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have to comment at this point and say, if there's a hero in this tragedy, it's Art Guerrero. Bless you. Anything further from the state?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Goncalves.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor, court staff, state, Mr. Guerrero. Almost 21 years ago, Carmen Mejia sat in a courtroom just like this one here in Travis County. And she listened as the foreperson of her jury announced that they had found her guilty of murder. Carmen knew she was innocent. Her lawyers believed in her innocence and fought hard to show the jury this was not a crime but rather a horrible, horrible accident. Unfortunately, they did not prevail. There were others, however, who were fully committed and, dare I say, hell-bent on seeing that Carmen was punished for what she knew all along was not even a crime, but rather a horrible tragedy. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be here today alongside Carmen as we recognize her innocence and her wrongful conviction. Over the past few years, as part of Carmen's legal team, I've had the privilege to observe firsthand the courage, strength, and faith that Carmen possesses and that has fueled her fight for freedom for over 2 decades. I've also had the privilege to observe the emergence of a promising, loving family relationship, a relationship that was snuffed out before it had the opportunity to blossom and grow. When Carmen was wrongfully arrested, prosecuted, and convicted 2 decades ago. The proceeding today is an opportunity for the public to see firsthand and hear firsthand the devastating direct impact of Carmen's wrongful conviction, as well as the almost tsunami-like ripple effect that it's had on so many lives of so many people. We've heard some of that already today from Mr. Guerrero, and we're going to hear some more as well. I want to take a moment to recognize how we got here today to this amazing moment of rebirth and justice. As an organization, the Innocence Project represents men and women across the country who are fighting to prove their innocence. And what we often see are prosecutors who, when confronted with new evidence that calls into question the evidence that was used to obtain a conviction, or even that outright contradicts that evidence presented at trial, the reflexive and often defiant response from the prosecutors and others involved in the original investigation and prosecution is to dig in their heels and commit to defending that conviction, right or wrong. As we've heard from Mr. Blvd, the ultimate responsibility of a prosecutor is to do justice, not to obtain a conviction and to then defend the conviction at any and all cost once they've gotten it. Fortunately for Carmen, the current prosecutor here in Travis County has demonstrated that he takes that ultimate responsibility to heart. It's not just a slogan on a website. In this case, the prosecutor has breathed life into those words. District Attorney Jose Garza, along with First Assistant Trudy Strasburger, compiled a team of folks who are committed to carrying out this responsibility to the people of Travis County and to the people of the state of Texas, which is to do justice. The Conviction Integrity Unit of the DA's office, headed by Mia de Saint Victor and the rest of her team, including Mr. Blvd and Sarah Byram, who are all here today, have worked tirelessly to reinvestigate the case on behalf of the district attorney and on behalf of the people of Travis County and the state of Texas. This time, however, with an investigation focused on the truth and seeking justice, not simply on obtaining or defending this wrongful conviction. A significant aspect of the reinvestigation, Mr. Blvd mentioned it earlier, focused on Dr. Elizabeth Peacock, who was the medical examiner who performed the autopsy on the deceased child, and on the information that was shared with her prior to her concluding in 2003 that the child's death was a homicide. This time, when provided with all of the information that was known at the time of the child's death, and with the opinion of a leading expert on burn injuries, 2 very vital pieces of information that was not provided to Dr. Peacock at the time she performed the autopsy. Dr. Peacock took the extraordinary step of revising and reversing her determination, concluding that the manner of death was in fact an accident and not a homicide. The fact that an actual qualified burn injury expert, had never weighed in on the cause of the child's injuries is another startling feature of this case. While the state presented at trial witnesses who offered their opinions as to the cause of the child's injuries, including a retired law enforcement officer who had proclaimed himself an expert on burn injuries by performing reenactments of burns using blue clothing dye in a bathtub. This was far from a qualified expert opinion. As a part of our reinvestigation, we did seek the opinion of an actual burn expert. As a result, Dr. James Gallagher, a burn surgeon and former director of the William Randolph Hearst Burn Center, one of the nation's leading trauma burn centers, reviewed the evidence and concluded that the bathtub's incredibly hot water could have caused accidental burn injuries, quote, in a matter of seconds. Based on his experience and expertise in burn injuries, and specifically immersion burns, which were the type in this case, he found that there was no medical evidence to support that this child's injuries had to be the result of an intentional act by an adult, directly refuting the 2005 trial testimony the state's purported experts offered. Dr. Peacock and Dr. Gallagher are just two of the fruits that came from the reinvestigation in this case. But they are two prime examples of how a proper investigation, at the onset, with the proper focus and objective, can prevent the exponential impact of a wrongful conviction. They both demonstrated what can come from a proper and thorough investigation, when the investigation's focus is on finding the truth and doing justice, not on finding the most vulnerable person to punish for what was, in fact, a tragic accident and not a crime. I think Dr. Peacock summed this up best when she was asked in one of our post-conviction proceedings in 2025 why she took the extraordinary step in revising her opinion as to the manner of the young child's death from a homicide to an accident, when she responded confidently, because it's the right thing to do. And I think finally, after more than 20 years, that's what's happening today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Castro?
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero, Judge Wahlberg, and District Attorney Garza, and the Travis County District Attorney's Office, and to the experts who provided invaluable testimony to get us here today to the truth. Thank you so much. With that said, it must not go without saying that there is one person that has helped us arrive to this moment. It is their immeasurable strength and bravery that has gotten us here, and that is Ms. Carmen Mejia. Before being wrongfully convicted and sentenced to life, Ms. Mejia was a young mother raising her 4 children here in Austin, Texas. Like many mothers, Ms. Mejia carried the weight of being the primary caregiver for her children, and she did so with immense pride, eagerness, and a lot of love. Ms. Mejia was a woman filled with hopes and dreams for the future that her children would have, and the life that she was committed to providing for them. Prior to her wrongful arrest, she had already established a stable home. Her eldest children were enrolled in school and receiving a proper education, and most of all, she surrounded them every day with love, care, and her presence. She was able to give her children many of the things that she did not have access to growing up as a child. Ms. Mejia understood what it meant to grow up in a home where it was filled with violence instead of love. She understood what it meant to go to sleep, not knowing when her next meal will be, to be denied access to an education. And it's because she had to experience all of this that she was committed and determined to make sure that her children never had to. It was because of her own difficult childhood experiences that she re-envisioned what life with joy, stability, and happiness could look like for her children. And she was successful in providing that into her wrongful arrest, subsequent conviction, and life sentence, which led her to being separated from her children for over 20 years without having any contact. In the face of that, an injustice that most of us cannot fathom, Ms. Mejia's faith in God, love for her children, and hope for justice have guided and grounded her. She, in moments where she was filled with despair, would think about her children and the unique qualities that they all possessed and memories that she had with each of them. Anyone who has the privilege of speaking with Ms. Mejia knows immediately the extraordinary woman that she is. You know that you are in the presence of someone filled with so much light. Within 5 minutes of any conversation, Ms. Mejia immediately starts complimenting you, starts highlighting some positive quality about you, and she makes sure that you leave no room feeling seen, celebrated, and honored. As a woman of deep faith, Ms. Mejia is always ready to share a prayer. Ms. Mejia's spirit has not been broken by the severe injustices that she has faced and all the ways in which this wrongful conviction has upended her life. Her light has not been dimmed, and her voice remains strong. I would like to conclude by directing my last words to Ms. Mejia, first in Spanish, and I would say it in English and translate it in English for the record. Carmen, este mensaje se lo dirijo a usted. Hemos aprendido tanto de ti, de tu fortaleza, de tu luz, de la manera que has sobrepasado todos los obstáculos. Nos has demostrado cómo tener alegría en momentos, aunque son pequeños, y cómo tener amor sin condiciones. Mereces este momento, mereces justicia y mereces una libertad verdadera, no solo hoy, pero para cada día que venga después. I directed my words to Ms. Carmen Mejia. Carmen, we have learned so much from you, from your strength, ability to overcome obstacles, find happiness in the smallest moments, and how to love without condition. You are deserving of this moment. You are deserving of justice, and you are deserving of true freedom, not just today, but for every day that comes after. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. Ms. Parker.
There is a clear pattern in our criminal legal system of wrongly accusing caregivers when a child in their care dies from accident or illness, particularly when those caregivers are women of color. Approximately 75% of women exonerated in this country, like Ms. Mejia, were convicted of crimes that never happened. We've seen too many cases like Ms. Mejia's where false and outdated medical testimony has led to wrongful convictions. We know undoubtedly thousands of people wrongfully are in prison today because of such testimony. When we think of the compounded harm here, a baby lost his life because of a tragic accident, the human toll of a wrongful conviction is incalculable. Ms. Mejia's 4 children lost their opportunity to have a relationship with their mother, which left a void and scarred their lives in ways that can never be repaired. Ms. Mejia's daughters were just 3, 4, and 5 in 2005 when she stood trial. Because at the time of her wrongful conviction, her children were adopted in a closed adoption, Ms. Mejia and her children were completely cut off from each other. Ms. Mejia was left to pray that her children were being loved and cared for, to wonder as the years passed what they looked like, who they were growing up to be. The first time they set eyes on each other again was in this court in 2024. Since that time, Ms. Mejia's daughters have done all they can do to connect with her, but their visits in jail are no contact. Their mother's touch is still unattainable in these visits as they are separated by a glass barrier. But like Ms. Mejia, they have faith that soon she will be free. Ms. Mejia's daughters are remarkable. They are women of incredible character and strength, which they credit to their mother. At this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Mejia's youngest daughter, MC, who would like to make a statement for the court.
Thanks, you just stepped out. We'll come back to her.
All right. Ms. Mejia's middle daughter, who cannot be here with us in court, also provided a statement that I'm going to read. This is from JP. Your Honor, I grew up my whole life with a huge piece of me missing, my real mom. There hasn't been a time in my life when I wasn't sad thinking about her. So when the DA's office reached out about reviewing my birth mom's case here in Travis County, my sisters and I were immediately there. We've been involved in everything, trying to get Carmen justice. They had the story wrong from the beginning, and now it's our responsibility to defend her. All I want is to be able to see and hug my mom. It's unbelievably hard to only get 20 minutes in front of glass. My hope for the future is that my mom gets out and can finally start the life she had to put on pause 20-something years ago, all for something she didn't do. I just want my mom back. And it's actually because of all this that I want to be in law enforcement. A lot of people collectively didn't do the right thing, and that's what put my mom behind bars for my whole life and over 2 decades of hers. This is my driving passion, wanting to do better within the justice system, because no one should ever have to go through what we went through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm also Ms. Mejia's eldest daughter, AP, who, as the court will recall, provided testimony when the hearing began, also has provided a statement. To the court, my name is Anna. Carmen is my birth mother. I'm writing this letter to explain how her wrongful conviction has impacted my life. Growing up, my sisters and I knew that our mother was in prison, but we never fully understood why. We were told that it involved a serious crime, but the full truth was never explained to us. We had a closed adoption, and many of the details surrounding what happened were never shared with us as children. For most of my life, we lived with the confusion, unanswered questions, and the painful reality of knowing our mother was gone without understanding the full reasons why. For years, we tried to make sense of something we were never given the chance to fully understand. It wasn't until 2024 when the Innocence Project contacted our family that we finally began to learn the truth about Carmen's case and what had really happened. As adults, hearing the full story and learning that new scientific evidence had proven the original conclusions wrong was both shocking and heartbreaking. After so many years of uncertainty, we were finally confronted with the reality that our mother had spent decades in prison for something she didn't do. One of the most difficult parts of growing up was the guilt that I carried as a child. The incident that led to Carmen's conviction involved a bathtub accident when I was very young. As a small child, I had turned on the water without realizing how hot it was. For many years, especially as a young teenager, I quietly carried the belief that somehow I was responsible without the knowledge or maturity to process it. I was a child trying to understand a tragic situation. The guilt stayed with me for very long. As I grew older, I began to understand what happened was a tragic accident and that I was only a child who could not have understood the danger. But the weight of those feelings, combined with knowing my mother was in prison, left a lasting impact on my life. When the case was finally re-examined and new experts looked at the evidence, the truth began to come forward. Hearing that the experts who were not present in the original trial had carefully reviewed the science and concluded that earlier interpretations were wrong was overwhelming. Learning that individuals involved in the original case had now acknowledged those mistakes only confirmed what our family had hoped and prayed for all along, that the truth would eventually be heard. The judge's recognition of Carmen's innocence means more to me than words can fully express. For most of my life, our family has lived with the consequences of a conviction that should have never happened. The wrongful conviction took away years of my mother's life and years that we should have had together as a family. It took away the chance for us to grow up with our mother present for the moments that matter most: childhood memories, guidance, comfort, and simply having a parent there. Those are years we'll never get back. Today's exoneration cannot return the time that was lost, but it finally allows the truth to be spoken and acknowledged. She has endured imaginable hardship while holding on to hope that one day the truth would come out. Our family has waited for this moment.
Thank you, Ms. Pike. And I have to say that the testimony of that witness was maybe the most powerful testimony I've ever heard in 50 years as a lawyer and a judge. It was so overwhelming that I was very clear that Dr. Peacock's recognition of that testimony really drove her decision to change her opinion from homicide to accident. Go ahead.
Hi, Judge. I am Carmen's youngest daughter. My entire life, I felt like a part of me was missing. Not knowing the woman who gave birth to me was extremely difficult. I could never say that I looked just like my mom or that I got my eyes from her. As a child, I told countless new friends the story I had always been told about why I was adopted and why I never got to know my biological mom. The only thing I truly knew about her was her name. I knew she was in prison, but I didn't know where or if she was even still in Texas. But I was always told that Carmen would be out of prison by the time I turned 18. In 2020, my family even hired a PI to try and find her, but we had no luck. Still, I never stopped thinking about her. About 2 years ago, the Travis County DA's office contacted me and my siblings about Carmen. We were shocked to learn that she had been convicted of murder, but my siblings and I know the truth about what happened that day. I often wonder if everyone involved in the case had known the full story, would we have even been separated? Would I have had to spend 22 years without knowing my mom?
promised time that neither of us will get back. I remember the first time I saw her in person at a hearing a couple years ago. I told myself I wouldn't cry because I wanted to be strong for her. But when she saw my sisters and me and began to cry, I couldn't hold back my tears. Since the day I have visited her in jail several times, written her letters, attended her hearings, I can finally say my mother is in my life. But we still haven't truly been able to get to know each other. Our visits are short and through glass at the jail, or small moments in a courtroom like this.
For more than 20 years, I have never had the chance to talk with my mother about the things daughters normally share with their moms, asking for advice or simply feeling a mother's unconditional love. I hope that I can finally build a meaningful relationship with her. I am excited for her to get to meet my partner and his family, and I want us to spend holidays together, birthdays, and even small moments like cooking dinner and sharing a meal. Something that may sound small to others but means everything to me is knowing what it'll feel like to finally hug my mom for the first time. I am grateful that justice is finally being reconsidered in Carmen's case, and I hope that no more time is lost. When I look at her now, I can finally see where I come from. We even have the same round cheeks. All I want is the chance to have the time with my mom that was taken from us. After more than 20 years of separation, all we are asking for now is the chance to be a family. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bodkin. So, excuse me, I think we need to get the interpreter closer to the microphone so everybody can hear. I think Ms. Mejia is going to speak in Spanish, is that correct?
I just want to thank God
por estar con nosotros en este momento,
for being with us here,
porque Dios hizo justicia por medio de mi esposito y de todos los que estamos conmigo.
because God did justice through the judge and everybody who's with me.
Yo siempre he mantenido mi fe y esperanzas en
Ah.
estos 20 años.
Throughout these 20 years, I kept my faith and my hope
Que Dios iba a hacer justicia
that God was gonna do justice.
y yo siempre le decía en estos 20 años Dios haz justicia, pon a alguien, un ángel. Yo creo en los ángeles primero y yo decía Dios me va a sacar de aquí un día, pero me va a
And
sacar.
I would ask God, please let justice be done. Give me an angel. I believe in angels, and I knew that someday I would come out.
Él escuchó mis oraciones en las de mi gente que eran cristianos.
And my prayers were heard, and my people's prayers were heard.
En En un 15 años Dios me reveló a un señor juez y donde mi fe creció más y más porque se me presentó él como un ángel.
And a judge was revealed to me, and he was presented to me as an angel.
En él me dijo, aquí estoy contigo, no be afraid.
And
Dios está en el cielo.
And God told me, don't be afraid.
En esa época yo estaba enferma,
At that time, I was sick.
estaba en el hospital.
I was in the hospital.
Por medio de la fe yo seguí creciendo en esperanzas que un día Dios iba a hacer justicia y hay que ver la justicia de Dios.
But with faith, I had hope that justice was going to be done, and now we see God's justice done.
Yo quiero darle gracias a todos los que están conmigo en este momento.
And I want to thank everybody who's with me in this moment, and to my judge. And that's all.
Thank you. Ms. Potter.
Judge, I think that concludes, and perhaps I think the state has some additional comments.
Was there anything else you wanted to say on Ms. Mejia's behalf?
Not at this time, Judge.
Thank you. Mr. Belair, I'm sorry, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you. Your Honor, we would request permission to address Ms. Mejia directly.
You may.
Thank you. Ms. Mejia, today we acknowledge that our office failed you. The state pursued and obtained a conviction against you for what we now understand was a tragic accident, and that failure cost you over 20 years of your life. Nothing that I say and nothing that we do in this courtroom today can restore the time that was taken from you or undo the pain and separation that you and your children have had to endure. We can't change the past. What we can do and what we must do is acknowledge that this never should have happened. You deserved a justice system that pursued the truth with fair and fairness, and as prosecutors, it's our responsibility to do so. In your case, we fell short of that responsibility. On behalf of the state of Texas, we offer our most sincere apology to you and to your children for the harm that was caused by this wrongful conviction. We hope that today marks a step toward restoring your name and allowing for you to move on and move forward with your life. Señora Mejia, de parte del Estado, lo siento. Ms. Mejia, on behalf of the state, we're so sorry. Your Honor, at this time, the state moves to dismiss the charges against Ms. Mejia on the basis that she is innocent. Thank you.
Thank you. So here in a moment, I'm going to sign an order dismissing all the charges against Ms. Mejia and ordering her release. Before I do that, I need to make a few comments. First, for the lawyers involved in this, as well as all the support staff here at the courthouse and in the DA's office and the Innocence Project, let me just say, regardless of what happens in your lives, you can go forward knowing that you've accomplished something difficult and important. You have my respect. Thank you. Ms. Mejia, I wish that signing this order here this afternoon would be the end of this tragedy. Unfortunately, I don't believe it will be. It's my understanding that Carmen Mejia had legal status at the time of this incident, but that legal status is no longer in place, and that there is an immigration detainer on file with Travis County. I think that means that there is an extreme likelihood, probably a certainty, that Ms. Mejia will be taken into custody by federal immigration authorities within the next 48 hours. That's a tragedy. That should not happen. I can't change that. What I can do, though, is say that if some federal judge, some federal prosecutor, some immigration officer listens to this case, they will know that there was a terrible injustice done here. And it would compound that injustice for Carmen Mejia to be taken into custody and removed from this country. That would be grossly unfair. While I can't alter whatever may happen in the federal system, what I can say is, first, there are a number of things about this case that in retrospect we can look at and say, if they had been known at the time of the trial, if they'd been known at the time of her arrest, we wouldn't have ever gotten to this point. It's my understanding that Ms. Mejia's children were interviewed in Spanish at the time or shortly after this incident and gave information that was exculpatory. That is, that they told law enforcement that Ms. Mejia was not in the bathroom at the time that hot water, maybe 150-degree water, something capable of causing third-degree burns in a matter of seconds. That the children actually told law enforcement that she was not present when that hot water was turned on. There are a lot of other things about this case that I think are unanswered. And we're not here today to point fingers. That does not advance the ball at all. The best thing I can do at this point is to say to any federal authority that looks at this case, please recognize that Carmen Mejia, before this incident, had legal status, had no prior criminal history, has served nearly 23 years in the custody of the state of Texas for something that was not a crime. That during that 23 years in the penitentiary, she did not commit any violent offenses. That at this point in time, having been in the custody of the state of Texas for 23 years, she does not have the wherewithal to flee the country. No money, no identification, no passport, no way to leave. She is not a flight risk. Thanks to the intervention of her biological children, she does have family support and a good reason to want to stay here in the future. So I hope that all of those factors are taken into account when some federal authority looks at this, because a removal at this point would be compounding the tragedy that's already occurred. So, Ms. Mejia, there's nothing that I can say at this point that will bring back those 23 years. Signing this piece of paper won't bring it back. There's no amount of money that will ever compensate you for losing the best years of your life. I wish I had that power. What I can do is say to you that there is every reason to hope and believe that your future will be better every day from now on. And I pray that it is. So I'm now signing this order, dismissing all charges against you, ordering you released from the custody of the state of Texas, finding you actually innocent of the crimes for which you were wrongfully committed. And for our security sheriff's department here in the courtroom, I'm going to relieve you of responsibility on this count, because normally our process and the procedures of our sheriff's department would not allow physical contact between the accused and any family member or someone such as that. So at this point, I'm simply ordering you to allow Ms. Mejia a few minutes of physical contact so that she may hug her children. Go ahead. Ms. Mejia, released from the custody of the state of Texas. Good luck. Thank each and every one of you.